Hi, welcome to the 50th episode of Poets in Pajamas. I am Hali Sofala-Jones. This is my very first time on Facebook Live, and I'm very nervous about it, but I'm really going to try and just power through. So, the reading for today is at 7 o'clock. I'll be sharing some of my poems with you all from my first collection. Oh, there went my cat. Afakasi, Half-Caste. But we'll give it some time for people to join. Oh, I just saw Eric Jones joined. Hi, Eric. So I wanted to, again, thank you all for spending some time with me this evening. I know it's hard, 7 o'clock on a Sunday, trying to reconcile with having to go back to work tomorrow. Well, at least 7 o'clock for those of us here on the East Coast. So thank you. I hope that you enjoy what you hear. So I wanted to spend this time maybe introducing myself a little bit. So as I said, I'm Hali Sofala-Jones. I'm coming to you from Milledgeville, Georgia, so the home of Flannery O'Connor. Thank you. Yeah, I got this sleep mask. I would say that I actually use it, but I really did get it just for this. But I like it. I have a scrunchie too. Someone had mentioned how they like my sleep mask. So coming to you from Milledgeville, Georgia, my family is actually from Eatonton, Georgia, which is just right next door. So the home of Alice Walker. So a lot of literary greats, a lot of great literary women from where I'm coming from. My father is from Samoa, and my mom is from the States. They met in California, and that's where I was born. But quickly, at 5, we moved here to Georgia. So I've lived most of my life in the American South. So some of that works its way into the book, being a Samoan who is living in a space where they never see any Samoans for most of their life. So the book is Afakasi, Half-Caste, as I said. Hi, Anna. I see Shelly, my aunt Aloha is here. Hi to all of you. So the book is Afakasi, Half-Caste, just out from Sundance Publications. I love it so very much. The cover is just this wonderful depiction of kind of what I'm trying to say in words. And my husband actually designed the cover for me and was able to kind of layer these different images, which for me captured perfectly kind of different layers of myself that at any one time are kind of firing, and I'm interacting with the world on a lot of different fronts. So the book just came out this month. And, you know, the word Afakasi is a Samoan word that refers to someone who is of mixed racial heritage. So someone who is half Samoan and half something else. So in my instance, that would be half Samoan and half Palangi, or half white. So the book, in one way, kind of captures that tension between those two identities, right? So growing up in the American South, I was not seen as fully white. And then growing up was difficult. I was always asked, well, what are you, right? Are you Mexican? Are you Hawaiian? Are you Asian? You know, so it was difficult. And then when you would say, no, I'm Samoan, no one knew what that was. So it was very difficult. So not being seen as white here in the States, and then when I started going to Samoa, I was called Palangi, so I was called white. So I wasn't Samoan when I was in Samoa, and I wasn't white when I was in the States. So there was a real tension there, and continues to be. And so the book kind of speaks to that. So I'm going to give it a couple of minutes. I see some folks have joined. Ashley, I see you there. Aubrey, my sister, has joined in. I have it on good authority that a lot of my family is going to come, which I'm both excited and terrified about. So other themes that kind of come up in the book, I think in a lot of ways the book is a coming-of-age narrative. So you'll kind of hear poems that take us from very early childhood, girlhood, all the way up into womanhood, and dealing with issues of gender and identity. And the big issue for me is this idea of not race, but home and exiles. So what do we get to call home, right? When you are someone who comes from a space that actively tries to deny your belonging, right? How do you find yourself belonging? How do you find yourself being able to claim that space? And so there's some of that here as well. We're at 7:02, so I guess maybe a couple more minutes. I know that when it comes to readings, I'm always kind of, jetting in a little bit late. So some things that I could talk about, really, just coming back from Portland. So we had AWP, so the Association of Writers and Writing Programs annual conference. That was in Portland, Oregon this year. And it was the first time I'd attended in several years. And so I spent a lot of time being terrified. I don't like going up in the airplane, like the initial takeoff. So that was terrifying. But Portland as a whole was nice. It didn't rain the whole time I was there, and that was a plus. I got some tasty food. I got to have donuts from Voodoo Donuts, which was nice. I was told that was something I should do while I was there. So I got home about 1 o'clock this morning. But, when you sleep in your own bed for the first time after several days, it kind of rejuvenates you in a way, probably a little bit more sleep than what you would have gotten kind of in a foreign bed. So I see a lot of folks have kind of joined on. So I think I'll go ahead and get started. There will be, excuse me, there will be a time for questions after the reading. So please feel free to store those up. If you have any questions about anything, I'd love to chat with you and talk a little bit about the poems, process, myself, my sleep mask, whatever you like. And I will apologize in advance. I have a very, very affectionate cat. And so if she comes wandering across the desk, just ignore her, I suppose. Her name is Calypso. So if you hear me kind of say, "Go away, Calypso," that's what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start with a poem that is a form poem. So I'm not really someone who likes to work with form poetry. So it being a form poem, there are rules to how it is supposed to be written. I'm much more of a free verse person myself. But I love the form of a villanelle. So a villanelle has 2 lines that repeat throughout, and you'll hear those as I'm reading. And because you have those repeated refrains, it really lends itself well to topics for which there exists an amount of obsession. And so the topic for this poem is language, particularly the Samoan language. I was not taught Samoan when I was a child, and I've had kind of stops and starts to learn it as an adult. But as we all know, that's pretty difficult, especially when you're in a place where, maybe 2 people, and they happen to be in my family, speak Samoan for miles and miles. So this poem is about that obsession of wanting to be a part of that language. And of course, it's more than just to be a part of the language, but language is second skin, right? Language is identity, and it's a key component to culture. So not having the language really did, and to some extent still does, feels like a gap that I'll never be able to get over, and never feel as if I'm fully Samoan. So the poem is titled after a Samoan proverb, and so I'll read the title, and then afterwards I have the translation. Ole upenga le talifa, a net that cannot be mended. There are no words that are mine to speak. My tongue wilts behind my teeth. There is no language for the Afakasi. When I was young, my dad would teach me Samoan verses to memorize and sing. There are no words that are mine to speak. He'd sit my sisters and me in a row of 3 and have us count tolu, lua, tasi. There is no language for the Afakasi. When it was my turn, I'd flee, hide in my room as they laughed at me. There are no words that are mine to speak. Each tainted word, whispered Palangi, betrayed me as half-caste, half-breed. There is no language for the Afakasi. I live in the silence of my own defeat, severed from the twin skin of speech. There are no words that are mine to speak. There is no language for the Afakasi. My hands. It began as a dare on the bus ride home, the frantic saw blade of the eraser nub rubbing across the thin skin of my large Samoan hand. And it was only when the blood began to mix with the shavings that I realized what I'd made my right hand do to my left. How those white boys and girls laughed, and I, knowing no better, laughed with them, my hand throbbing beside me. That night I coddled the gash, whispered to the wound, willing it to not become infected. It was weeks before it scabbed and healed, days when I carried my hand close to my chest, cosseted. When the scab fell away, the long lip-like scar lingered for years. I thought I would have it always. And when my father asked me one day where I'd gotten such a thing, I told him I'd run into a door, and he believed my lie. How could he imagine the truth? The violence of self-erasure, the desire to be made and unmade and made again. So I write a lot about my grandparents. Really, I would say my grandmothers. I grew up having a very close relationship with my maternal grandmother. My maternal grandfather passed away when I was quite young, just 2 years old. And even though I've always felt a kinship with him, I didn't know him as a child, really. I didn't, of course, know him into adulthood. But my maternal grandmother has always been in my life, has always been in my life. She had lived with my family for a great portion of my childhood and even some of my adulthood. And so there's a great influence there. My maternal grandmother, Joanne Rice, passed away just last September. So there's still a lot of grief and mourning there, but also a lot to celebrate and remember the ways that she has influenced my life. So I write about my grandmother, Joanne Rice, but I also write about my grandmother in Samoa, Grandma Sao, and some of those poems will come a little bit later. So the poem I'm about to read to you that I kind of think of as a grandmother poem has to do with movie musicals. So my grandmother, or my gram, I'll call her my gram because that's how I refer to her. So my gram loved movies. She loved movies. And so she loved not to pay for them, but to videotape them off of cable TV. So she had kind of the VHS tapes, you could tape like 3 2-hour movies to a tape. And she just had, hundreds of these. And so when we would come and stay with her over the summers, when school was out, we would watch movie musicals. So, for much of my life, I was very invested in Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire and Judy Garland and all of these, beautiful kind of darlings of Hollywood. And I didn't really know that they were kind of out of time with where I was growing up in the 90s. So the poem I'm about to read, the title comes from the movie musical Showboat. And if you're familiar, this is with Howard Keel and Ava Gardner. And there's a line in the poem that says, others find peace of mind in pretending, couldn't you, couldn't I, couldn't we? And so the poem kind of comes about because I'm thinking of the way beauty was displayed in those films, the way, what it meant to be a woman and what it meant to be beautiful and worthy of love. And, these women were all white and they were all very thin, and most of them had, blonde hair and beautiful voices and such grace. And so watching these as a child, I didn't realize that I was coming to see that as normal. And it took a while to understand that I was outside of that narrative. And once I found out that I wasn't a small, graceful, blonde, white woman, there was a period of wondering, well, will I ever get the kind of love that I see in these movies? And is that the kind of love that I want? So the poem, let me get to that. Only Make Believe. I learned about love sitting cross-legged on a stained carpet in my Graham's single-wide trailer. Every summer vacation, we sat inside watching musicals. 100 or more stored, 3 to a tape, sleeve after sleeve, numbered and stored in her entertainment stand. In the scenes, costume-clad men crooned to women trussed up in lace, parasols in hand. Someone should have told me that love didn't work the same for fat brown girls as it does for thin white women in movies. Told me, for example, that calves like carved stone and hands big enough to hold a ripe melon in each palm aren't what men want. Instead, I waited for a man to woo me in the moonlight, to sing to me aboard a riverboat churning the Mississippi. Waited for sweet words whispered against pale skin, hands circled around a cinched waist. Waited to be the kind of woman in the movies, the kind of woman who deserved it. Clearing. Back then, when I never thought of myself as a girl, I spent long days clearing brush, skinning thin branches from trees. My father cutting the wilder paths, and me, machete in hand, whacking whatever was left behind. My sisters were too small-bodied for the job and whined whenever brought out to the far acres. I was the only one who laced up my work boots regularly, who welcomed the bite of heat in the clamped jaw of July. And I remember waking one night, my arm and shoulder throbbing with a burn that would turn to the most delicious soreness by dawn. My father awake too, but silent, flipping through 3 a.m. rugby matches. I remember thumbing the lid of a pill bottle, the thing which had brought me out in the first place, and deciding to put it aside instead. And I sat with my father until morning, pain strumming down the skein of our bodies, both of us unwilling to give it language, unwilling to admit we were anything but real men. So this next poem is about a nemesis that if you're from the South, you are very familiar with it, the fire ant. So count yourself lucky if you are not someone who has been introduced into the group of folks who've been bitten by a fire ant, because it hurts. So the poem, in its way, right? I mean, I'm dealing with the southern fire ant, which is a reflection of living in the South, right? So having to love the land, but also take with it some of the more painful parts of it, but also to recognize that those painful parts, I guess, also have a right to the land and a legacy there. So. The southern fire ant. A friend told me once she heard one scream as she smushed it between her thumb and a desk. But our teacher swore we were imagining a tiny voice box where there was none. Imagining instead the scream we'd let loose if we found ourselves on the business end of a boot or saw a finger hurtling towards us like a flesh-toned meteorite. Yet I didn't know how to feel that Sunday when my daddy took a gas can to each grainy mound of red earth tilting it just over the opening and letting the liquid funnel before showering the hole. I sat on the front porch and watched him go hill to hill, dropping a lit match onto one onto one colony after the other, until the entire yard was littered with tiny fires. It looked to me like a whole universe of small worlds ablaze, the air filled with screams I could not hear. So I talked a minute ago about my gram, and told you that she passed away in September of 2018. And this poem came out of the experience of her being in the hospital and thinking about what could I ever do for this woman to acknowledge and pay her back for the enormous contribution she made to my life, and coming up short because there's nothing I could do or can do to pay back somebody for laying the foundation for an entire life, and having to come to terms that what I could do is just to be grateful, to do small things, to take care of her and to honor her memory. So, Her Last Rainstorm, for Joanne Rice, 1928 to 2018. It's raining tonight, fat plops of summer rain hitting my windshield, shining iridescent in the passing glow of streetlights. Tonight, my grandmother is dying in a hospital 2 towns over. She'll be dying tomorrow and for days after that, her body failing gently. I wonder how many times in a lifetime has she been caught in the rain? A beehive or bouffant ruined, a sudden downpour destroying the fragile nest of aquanet. If this is to be her last rainstorm, what is my duty as a granddaughter? Should I cup and carry palmfuls of water to sprinkle on her head? Do I peel back the roof of her hospital room like the lip of a can lid? I want her rasped skin to soak in its final storm. Tethered to nothing now, the monitor sparking, then silent. So switching gears a bit from that poem, I have to say I have 2 younger sisters. We are each 3 years apart. We're incredibly close and have been that way our whole life. So the middle portion of the book is titled Uso, Sister, and it's dedicated to my sisters, and it's about being a Samoan woman in the United States, in the American South, which can feel very isolating, right? And that could be part of what makes us so close, is there really is no one else that has our exact experience of being Afakasi in Middle Georgia, that we've met. So this poem is titled Time Machine. Time Machine. In the waiting room, you realize there are no more bargains to be made with God. You are alone in a linoleum bubble. Yet this is not a destruction of faith. The cathedrals still climb in your mind. In one sits your mother, your father. Your sisters are there too. Even your dog paces past the archway of the door, sunlight holding her. So when the doctor waves his freckled hand at you, calling you to his side, your knees do not buckle. Your mind becomes a Rolodex, holding every image at once. You focus on a stormy afternoon. You and your sisters build a time machine, steal bread for the journey, kiss for luck. You go and go and go. And I'll never not tell this story. So Aubrey, I know you're watching, and I'm sorry, but whenever when I first read this poem to my sisters, my youngest sister, Aubrey, said, Yes, I remember the day that you and Joelle built the time machine because you locked me out of the room and said there was no room in the time machine for me. So again, Aubrey, I apologize. The next time we build a time machine, Joelle and I will take you with us, okay? So these next few poems that I'm going to read, and then I will have some time for your questions, which I'm really excited about. So hopefully you maybe have thought of some, are about my experiences directly going to Samoa and kind of experiencing that. So the poem that I'm going to read is Afakasi, Half-Caste. And the poem came out of a particularly bad day I was having. I was reading about some successes that other people were having on the writing market. And I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I am. And, you know, some of the people, I was familiar with their work, and I was just like, this work, what is it doing? What is it saying? I don't understand. And I just wished that I could write about something else, right? I wanted people to hear my work. And I felt like I'm always writing about identity. I'm always trying to figure out, who am I and where do I belong in this, you know, big wide world? And I really just wanted to be one whole thing and be able to put down the burden of always searching. And so this poem came out of that. So in a lot of ways, it's a plea, it's a lament. Afakasi, Half-Caste. What can I tell you about this body but that it is mine? Not my mother's, though she tried harder than any to mold its soft form. Not my father's, though I carry his color. Often I wish I were an already discovered fact. My body and its histories known like the mapped, the chronicled, the cliched phrase at home in every mouth. I wish to give you my shovel, my miner's helmet, lamp affixed. Will you take these words, every word, until all I have are 10 fingers to trace my lines at this exact moment, so that for once I will have a whole thing beneath my hands, all that will ever be and never be again. So this poem that I'm going to read is titled Taulunga, and in Samoan that refers to a dance that is used to celebrate the ending of an arduous task, or to kind of commemorate a great moment, a great event. So I thought, you know, for me, the event that's described in this poem, which is, you know, you'll see, is just observing my grandmother, Sal, my grandma Sal, and seeing how beautiful she is. For me, that was something that was a moment of just real beauty and real celebration, and being able to see myself in her, and to say, if I see her as beautiful and I see myself in her, then am I not also beautiful? Which might not be a big revelation for some of you, but for me, it was. So, Taulunga. I was 15 when my mother drove me to a white doctor who had never seen a Samoan before. He laid me on his table, pulled the paper smock from my body, as if he were not the first man to see me without the armor of clothing. He surveyed me a specimen. The tufts of black hair, the darkness of skin, the plump swells of belly and breast. Even my feet, too big for my mother's shoes, did not escape the scrutiny of his gaze. Abnormal, he said. That is what you are, he said. He told me to write an essay on being abnormal. He wanted me to write myself into shame. I was 15, that age when a girl is still unsure of her body, unsure what to name any of her parts. When I am 21 in Samoa, I watch my grandmother braid caramel candies into leis for the whaifeau. My grandmother is bare-breasted beside me, her lava knotted at her waist, She is all softness, and the pale scars of birthing 10 children mark her almond skin. No straight edges to her body, just full, round hills of flesh. And she is beautiful. Her image awash in the midday sunlight that streams through the slat blinds and pulls upon us both. So I just have 2 more poems to share with you. This next one is one of the first poems that I wrote about Samoa, and it's titled Fa'asamoa, which translates to the Samoan way, which is kind of an all-encompassing idea of the way that Samoans approach life. And, you know, in that is celebration and camaraderie and extreme kindness and family values, but it really extends to really the entire way that Samoans think about themselves and their contribution to their society and the world. But I focus on here just a scene from a village, but also the beauty of the landscape too. So, Fa'asamoa, the Samoan way. 4 o'clock creeps slowly, riding in on waves of heated air that shoot up hills and deliver time to Wailele on the ocean's veranda. The young men play cricket or rugby as elders watch, longing to play one more time, but shuffle feet instead, their cleats pressed idly in soft Samoan soil. Volleyballs bounce into fields of play, tanned children do ducking dances, dodging older boys who chase rugby dreams and rugby balls to black tar lines painted in the grass. Through the air slices the sound of a horn like a conch shell blown through time, shaking us from waking dreams, bidding us home. Every house is sacred. Prayers float instinctively up, past geckos that crawl on the ceiling, past palms that curve over the red tin roof. Grandmother sings out of key and out of tune, Fa'avai ile atua Samoa. 8 o'clock leaves us with tomorrow, a promise in the water, as fleeting as floating seaweed, as constant as the coral reef, as momentary as the breaking wave. So as I said, next poem will be my last poem, and I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And again, questions will be after, so any questions, feel free to kind of fire away. This poem is titled Mamalu, which is a Samoan word that translates into sacred in English. Mamalu, sacred. There are stories that are sacred. We hold them as a new mother might, supporting them in the crook of our arm, holding them tight to the firm wall of our chest. The first moment I see my grandfather, I bend to hug him because he is possessed by spirits that lock his legs, pour cement on his feet. He can barely lift his arm, and I feel the dead weight flung around my neck. I search for the man of legend, the warrior of my father's stories. I am unsure how to love him. This is a sacred story. At home, I smile and show the gifts of my trip, a few leis, a dozen smuggled pieces of coral, a blue starfish. I show my family how to dance in Samoan, swaying my hips like the coconut palms. Months later, I sit alone and remember my grandfather, his skeletal form, his drooping eyes. I sob because I forgot to tell him I love him, or because I did not know how, in his tongue or mine. This is a sacred story. I write down a line that turns into 2 and then 3, scrawled across a page he will never see. And I find my tongue. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much. So questions, I'm going to kind of look over here and see kind of what folks were doing. So someone asked about AWP. So they heard that the conference was a little underwhelming and overcrowded. Yes, I would say so. It was. I was told that we were in the part of Portland that wasn't like where you should see as a tourist in Portland, and there was a lot of construction. So I would say that the locale was a bit underwhelming where we were, conference center wise, and it was quite crowded. It was quite crowded for the space. So I'll definitely go again. But next year we're in Texas, and I'm excited about that. So many of you joined, and I didn't realize because I didn't know to scroll down. So I'm sorry about that. So let's see. So my sister says, where can we buy the book? And so the book is on Sundress Publications website if you're interested in the book. So you can head over there to Sundress Publications. My sister Aubrey here says that she's publicly forgiving me for the trauma of leaving her off the time machine. So thank you for that. And I see my Auntie Aloha says that she's proud of me. So that means a lot. Hi, Auntie. Wow, so many of you joined in. That's so wonderful. Thank you, friends and family. So we'll wait around a minute for questions, and I thought I would talk a little bit just about kind of putting this book together and some of the kind of the process behind it. People, I got a lot of questions this week when I was at the writing conference at AWP about kind of how long it takes you to put a book together, how long you've been working on this, and for those of you that know me, I've been in school for a long time. I kind of went undergraduate, MFA, Ph.D, pretty streamlined there. And there's a lot of each of those in this book. So when I talk about it being a coming of age narrative, that really is true because it's, because some of the poems go back 10 years when I was still maybe more actively struggling with issues of identity that in some ways have been kind of put to bed. So I tell people when they were coming to want to buy, when they were thinking about buying the book, I tell them, it's about, trying to find a place to call home. It's about kind of reconnecting a fragmented identity. It's about what does it mean to perform, femininity? What does it mean to be seen as a woman and counted as a woman? But I tell them it has a happy ending, and hopefully, you saw that in that last poem. The book, in a lot of ways, is about coming into language, coming into the ability to narrate my own experiences and be proud in that. So let's see if we have any. So Victoria, hey Victoria. Victoria asked if I'll get to visit Samoa again, and I'm hoping to go, not this summer, but probably next summer. I'm working on a book that is responding to Margaret Mead's Coming of Age in Samoa. So I'm hoping to go next summer, and my daughter, who is 4 now, will be 5 then, and I think that's a fine age to go to Samoa and remember it, to meet family, and also to endure a 14-hour plane ride. So I'm dreading it a little bit, but I think by 5 she'll be able to handle that. Joelle says, when you're famous, will you remember us? And I'm just going to bypass that. That's my sister. She's being silly. So Anna Black, did finishing the book and getting it out there help in any way to make peace with the challenges of being Afakasi? So yes and no. I don't want to think of writing as therapy, right? But I think that writing gave me a way to express these feelings. It gave me a way to be seen in a way that in a lot of ways, it doesn't seem like the world allows me to be seen as a Samoan woman. And so having the book gave me the ability to do that. It also, as I said, kind of this idea of a happy ending, I've done a lot of work to kind of carve out a space for myself that is where, Afakasi, Half-Caste, this is where we reside, and this is where I reside, and it feels good, and it feels productive to be able to talk about these things. And at AWP, I met a wonderful woman who is also Afakasi, and is kind of at the beginning of the journey of figuring out kind of what that means. And so for her to find my book and for us to connect, and she lives just in Tennessee, in the state above me. So we have plans to grab coffee this weekend. You know, I told everyone I could not sell another book. I could not write another book. And I would be so absolutely fulfilled with finding someone else who got so much out of my book. So I think that the act of writing the book and getting it out and being seen, but also having that kind of mirrored back to me by someone saying, I am also Afakasi, and this book matters to me. That's just, geez, you know, how do you not love that? So my daughter wants to know if she can come out of her room. So I'm guessing pretty soon. So I'm going to give just a minute more to see if there's any other questions out there, but there's so many of you being so flattering. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you. And I would say, I guess, let's see. Oh, my aunt asked if I'll sign her book, and of course I will. I'm having the big book launch in just a few weeks, and I'm excited, and there will be cake, and, you know, family and friends are coming, little kiddos are coming, and I'm excited. I'll do a little bit of a reading. Most of it will just be a celebration. And then I'm headed out on a book tour. So those of you who are in different parts of the U.S., those of you in the South, those of you in my family, I'm sure you've heard me read. But those of you who are coming from other spaces, just look out for me there. So I think I'm going to wrap it up. Again, this was Poets in Pajamas, episode 50. So excited that I'm the person that got to be a part of that. And well, let's see. Well, now my best friend Shelly has chimed in, so I have to say something. So, God is still writing the story of your life. Amen to that. And so are you. I can't wait to read more. So the next book, I mentioned a little bit earlier. So working on a response to Margaret Mead's Coming of Age in Samoa. And I think I'm going to do something with those movie musicals that my grandmother had me watch. It's very interesting, to both love something, but to see such fault in it as well. So maybe talking about that tension. All right. I hope you all have a good night, a happy Monday. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm thinking you can probably share this video when it's over. So if you thought it was worthwhile, I have no problem. These are my favorite jammies. I have a scrunchie if you can see it. So I have no problem with me and my pajamas being shared far and wide on your various news feeds. So thank you so much. I love all of you. Have a good night.